everyone, I'm Rebecca and welcome back to my sewing room. I am so freaking excited to get started on the project this week that we have in store, which is Jane Seymour from the musical Six. Now, if you are not familiar with the musical Six, you've got to go onto Spotify or YouTube right now and go listen to that cast album. Personally, I prefer like the original London studio cast, but if you like the Broadway one, you can go listen to that as well. It was recorded live, which I don't tend to like. But yeah, you've got to go listen to it. It is so good. So Six the Musical is actually a musical about the six wives of Henry VIII. And they take those original stories that like we don't know very much about them really, and they're all kind of told from the perspective of men, let's be honest, and they take those stories and they tell them in their own words, obviously with a little bit of a flair, and the whole thing is just, it feels like a total rock concert, and the costumes reflect that as well. So there is some inspiration from like original Tudor shapes, Tudor lines, etc., but these are like rock band type costumes. So just for example, here's all six of the girls, and this is Jane Seymour. So this is what I'm going to be creating. Now, there are a ton of different versions of the Jane Seymour costume that have occurred over the years since this musical first came out, which I think was in 2018. Even down to the fact that Natalie Paris, who was the original Jane in the West End and who also happens to be the Jane that I got to see on tour last year when she was touring around the US, she alone has like 4 different versions of this costume, and my favorite version is this one right here. So some of the things that changed throughout the years that this has been going on are that the tabs were added around the waist, and also that black section that's kind of on the bottom half of the bust that has very different lines. Like there's at least 4, if not more, versions of just the black section below the bust, and really just the bust itself. And I like this version here because it's a little bit more coverage of the bust, and I think that this black shape is a little bit more flattering than some of the others that have been out there with this higher coverage version. So yeah, I'm gonna be diving into this cosplay this week, and I ideally want to have this cosplay wearable in time for Halloween. Now, obviously you are seeing this video very close to Halloween. However, at the time that I am starting this, at the time that I am filming this, it is October 8th. So I have a little bit of time for this, but not very much because I start rehearsals for another show next week, and I still have one more weekend of performances for my current show this weekend. So time is super limited, and I really just want to make this wearable for Halloween. And so kind of what I'm thinking of, at least to begin with, is to make the skirt first, and then to make the like bodice under portion part, because basically if we look at this picture right here, we can see that the white bodice is a whole separate piece. And I also took this screenshot right here, which came from a backstage interview with one of the alternates, and she shows that it is 3 separate pieces. So we have skirt, we have kind of top, and then we have the bodice. And in addition to that, I don't know if all of the actresses who play Jane wear a corset underneath, but Natalie Paris did wear a corset underneath the outfit itself. So really that bodice was not functioning as a corset. It was a decorative piece that is being worn over a corset. If one of my corsets looks good under this, like gives me the right shape, that is also my plan. So I have to decide which, if any, are going to be the right shape, because I don't really have like a bustier type corset. So I'm probably gonna just kind of go through like my little corset drawer and see what kind of gives me the right shape for that. But I do feel like not having to make this into a garment that is really serving a structural purpose is going to be a lot easier, particularly because of the fabrics that we are working with here. So let's talk about fabrics. 3 of these fabrics I bought in the fabric district. That's the 3 that I currently have. I do still need one more fabric for this project for the top portion. But for the skirt, I have these fabrics right here. Now, I don't know if this is quite as like shiny and reflective on screen as it is in person. I really hope it is, but this is actually made of 2 different fabrics. So we have this one right here, which is a stretch, kind of a knit stretch fabric that has all of these rainbow, sparkly, iridescent little facets all over it. And then this is kind of a wide mesh net fabric. And together that really creates the look of the skirt and of the sleeves here. So I'm really excited to work with those, but they are fabrics that I've really never worked with before. They're both stretchy and I'm going to have something underneath them to give them some sort of structure. This skirt is also made of tons and tons of little panels. So I was hoping that maybe I could get away with like doing this as one panel and then adding decorative strips between. But like if we look closely at this skirt and you look at the direction where they meet at each of those like seam lines, they are actually separate pieces that are meeting at the seam line. So yeah, I think I am going to cut all of those separately. To be honest, at this point, I don't know how many there are supposed to be. Considering how many bootlegs there are of this production, there's really not like stills of the back of this outfit. I have like a couple that I snapped from bootlegs, that I like screenshot from bootlegs, that I'm using as my picture proof for what the back looks like, but really that's like the back of the corset. And speaking of the corset, this is my fabric for the corset. So this is like a, I don't even know what fabric you would consider this. It's not a vinyl. It's like a spandexy type fabric. I think you can really hear it, which is kind of a grotesque sound that it makes, but it is this beautiful white iridescence. I hope you can see the iridescence on here and that it doesn't just look plasticky, but I really think that this is going to look great for the corset piece. Obviously, it's going to require some structure underneath because these costumes, like the actual corset, is, I believe, vinyl. I've heard in interviews where they're talking about it being a very stiff vinyl, almost like a hard shell. And yeah, I'm not working with that because I don't know where to find that. I don't know how to sew that. So we are working with this like spandexy weird stuff instead, and I'm going to have the structure underneath, which is why it will also help if this goes over a corset as opposed to serving as the actual structural layers. But most likely I'm going to be lining or flat lining this with cotton canvas because cotton canvas is going to give me that structure that I want. But that is definitely not something that we are getting to today, the corset, because honestly, if I can only finish like the skirt and the bodice portion in, you know, this time period that I have here before Halloween, I do have just like a white Victorian corset that I suppose I could wear for a Halloween party and people would still know what I'm going for. Obviously, it's not what I want to do. We're going to try to do as much of this as possible. But also that brings me to kind of the next dilemma in all of this is that if you look at this costume, every time you're looking at one of those like seam dividers, both on the bodice and on the skirt, those are covered in studs. And those are covered in gunmetal colored studs. Now, some of the versions I think have had silver. And I suppose if I did do this as silver, it would be easier because those are easier to find, and you can, like, there are a couple of trims that you can purchase that already have some silver studs, though there's really only like one option on Amazon, which is where you can get cheaper trims. But the version that I like has gunmetal. And so my second part of this whole dilemma and why this is probably going to actually take quite a long time is that I think I have to stud this myself. And I just like counted yesterday how many studs there are on any one seam. On each skirt seam, there's approximately 30 studs. And I don't know how tall Natalie Paris is, so it's entirely possible that I might need way more than 30 studs to go from like waist to knee, which is about knee length. And then on the bodice, a lot of those seams that are dividing each section of the bodice are like 20 studs. So if you do the math, that is like so many studs. And the gunmetal studs specifically, in what I think is the size that I need. I've not ordered any of these yet. I've just been looking at them online. The gunmetal studs in the size that I need seem to only come in the prong style studs. And I, for the life of me, cannot figure out if there is any sort of tool besides a 1980s bedazzler that sets prong style studs. Like, I don't know why my Google foo is completely failing me on this. So if you know the answer to this, if you know what the tool is that sets prong style studs besides a 1980s bedazzler, because otherwise I might go just on eBay and find a 1980s bedazzler, please let me know. A 1980s bedazzler will only set, I think it's like size 20 and size 40 studs, which I believe I looked up are 4mm and 8mm studs. I know that 4mm is going to be too small. 8mm might work. I have to wait until some things go together before I can figure out exactly what size of stud I need, but I think 8mm is actually what I'm going for. So like I could use a bedazzler, but if there's something better / cheaper out there that can set all of these where I don't have to push each one in and bend the prongs, please let me know, because the glue style studs that are like fake studs that you can just glue on, those only seem to come up to 6mm. I can't find any in gunmetal that are 8mm, and I really don't want to have to like spray paint a bunch of studs or a bunch of googly eyes or whatever. I would like these to already be made so that I can just put them on. So yeah, that is a lot of talking about how this whole project is going to go. There are obviously more pieces to this than just skirt, top, and bodice. There are shoes, for example. I am actually testing out a pair of shoes right now, which I can't hold my foot up that high. I'm sorry, not for a long amount of time, but these are 3.5-inch heels. I have no idea, considering I'm making this also for Comic-Con, I have no idea if I am going to be able to wear 3.5-inch heels to Comic-Con. Like, they'd be fine for Halloween. I have one other pair on order that I'm going to compare comfort level. The pair that I'm wearing right now is from Amazon. I will stick the link down in the description because so far, wearing them around my house today, they are actually pretty comfortable. But again, I don't know how long my feet will find that to be true of 3.5-inch heels. And the other pair that I'm ordering are also 3.5-inch heels. But yeah, the boots will wind up getting rhinestoned all over. And then I purchased a pair of like really wide fishnet rhinestone tights. But if we look closely at the tights here, it almost looks like there's 3 layers of tights, like a really wide fishnet with the rhinestones on it, a smaller scale fishnet, and then like just kind of a semi-sheer black underneath. I don't want to wear 3 pairs of tights, so I'm not 100% positive what I'm going to do there yet. I'm also going back and forth on whether or not I want to do a wig for this or not. It does seem like traditionally a lot of the Janes have been blonde. However, other Janes of other ethnicities like Asian, Hispanic, Black, etc. have all used hair color that kind of makes more sense with their skin coloring. Like, it looks very natural. And so if I'm allowed to be like redheaded Jane, cool. If not, I don't know if one of the blonde wigs that I have already maybe will work, or if I should get one that looks maybe a little bit more realistic, because I feel like mine look like a lot of hair. And then there is a little spiked up headband that goes with that as well. I think that's all of the pieces to Jane. And as I mentioned before, I have one more fabric to get, which is just going to be a stretch black, because I realized after purchasing the initial fabrics at the Fabric District that really, if we look at the shirt, the undershirt, both there's a stripe down the sleeve like this that is just plain black, and then also most of the bodice is also just plain black. I also need to get a chain that will run across the neckline here. So there's still a bunch of stuff that I have to acquire. Luckily, other than the studs, there's nothing that I have to acquire for the skirt, which is why we're starting on the skirt. So let's go ahead and mock up this multi-paneled skirt. So this is mock-up number 1 of the skirt, and unfortunately I don't think it's gonna work. It's just not giving the right flare. Like, if we look at this picture right here, you can see the flare that it is meant to have, and I think that is coming because almost all of those panels are actually separate panels. I tried to do mine in just 5 panels, so a center front here, and then kind of a side, and then 2 back panels, and it's just not giving me the sort of flare that I want. Like, you can see, I mean, obviously this is drapier fabric, but it is just not getting that kind of flare out. And I think that the way to do that, as opposed to just being able to flare like on these seams where it kind of looks like it's flaring disproportionately, I need to be able to flare kind of everywhere. So yeah, that is definitely unfortunate. I also think my high-low, like my hem, is definitely not working. Right now I do have seam allowance in here, so it is maybe about a 1/2 inch longer than it's meant to be. Obviously it's also hard to see my knees in these tights, but it's a little bit too long in the front. It's going like weirdly longer at the seam, just the seam is dipping down. Then it's going somehow up through the side and then coming down to actually, I think just about the exact length I want in the back, but the rest of it is just kind of funky. Like this might be appropriate and it might just be that it's too long in the front. What I think I might try doing is kind of leveling off the hem of this and then kind of recutting it into smaller individual panels and seeing if that really helps the shape. But that's too bad. I was hoping that I could get away with just 5. Well, the hem is a little bit better. I think it could still go a little higher in the front, but I definitely just need more flare. I don't think it's working, and I don't think that it will make a difference in the other fabrics. I think it just needs more, like just stick out way more and just to have more volume by the hem. So too bad. This, by the way, for reference, was 120 inches around the hem. I have a 41-inch waist, so that is basically a like 3-to-1 ratio. And obviously that's not enough. Okay, so here's the thing. I'm looking at this picture right here, which is a backstage picture, and you can obviously see like the skirt and also the underbodice there, or the underblouse. And I'm looking at hers and it doesn't actually look that full at the hem. In fact, if anything, it looks less full than what I have here, but there's definitely a lot more room around her hips than there is for me, because when you look here, like it's basically slim to my hips until just past kind of mid hip, and then it's flaring out. It's like I need more volume at my hips, and I don't honestly know if breaking it up into all of those little panels, if that's gonna do something like that. So what I've done here, just to kind of figure out what volume I'm actually working with, because this fabric is too drapey, is I have a roughly petticoat on underneath this that's very full, and I'm not planning to wear a petticoat with this because the skirt should have its own body. The skirt's going to be made out of a taffeta layer plus the 2 decorative layers that I showed you, and yeah, it should have its own body and not need a petticoat. But I'm wondering now, maybe this is actually okay. I don't know with these types of panels if there is any real way for me to get more volume in the hips besides potentially increasing the waist and not actually have it be a fitted waist. It's really hard to tell from this picture if that's what's going on with hers. It almost does look like it's got an elastic waist, which means that there is a little bit of extra give at the waist that I don't have. So, I mean, it's possible, but I just can't imagine a skirt that's probably this heavy to have an elastic waist when people are like dancing and everything. That seems dangerous. That seems like a skirt risk, you know, losing your skirt. So I don't know. I would really, really rather not fully repattern this. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to draw on the lines that would be the stud tape lines and see kind of what that looks like and see if that makes a difference with like this skirt flow, and just see maybe the whole thing about it being a little bit more slim to my hips, maybe that's not noticeable once I have all of those lines on, which those lines will also add to the stiffness because they're like leather tape with studs. Okay, I think I may have actually figured this out. So I was realizing that the back area was actually looking pretty decent, and it was really like this kind of front side area that was just not looking the way that it ought to. And granted, this is still in super limp fabric, not in, you know, anything resembling the actual fabric I'm going to be using. So hopefully this mock-up will actually be functional. But basically what I wound up doing was I wound up actually taking some of the fabric out of the center front panel here. So you can see this is now in the seam allowance, because the center front panel, like where I drew my dividing line, this is the center front line here, this line to the seam was way larger before than any of these line sections over here, because they're all approximately 3 inches between each line at the top and about 8 to 8.25 inches down at the bottom. And again, it was just way, way wider in the front for those 2 panels. And then on top of that, what I did was I actually inserted another panel. So there is one panel right here, which is 3 inches across at the top, not including the seam allowance, and 8 inches down at the bottom. So yeah, I feel like that is giving the sort of flare out with the little bit of more fabric around the hips, because what I did to kind of combat that and also combat the stretch that has been happening with all these, because I did not stay stitch this before I was trying everything on, but what I did was I ran a gathering stitch around the whole top. Actually, it's a whole bunch of series of gathering stitches now that I've broken up all of the panels. But yeah, there's gathering stitches there. And I feel like once the bodice is on, we're going to have like all the little tabs here. So you're not really going to be able to tell that there is gathering going on, but there's going to be that little bit more over the hips and then the more flare out down here. So I'm really hoping that this is now the proper flare and it's going to look good in the 3 layers of actual fabric, which means it is time to cut those out, except I really want to use taffeta, and I've called multiple Joannes today and no one has black taffeta. Now, most of the versions of this skirt are lined with black. There is at least one version that is lined with white. Do I want to do white though? Because I think I actually have white taffeta. Or what I can do, or at least I maybe can do, because I haven't checked how much of this I actually have, this is black matte satin. Now it does not have the stiffness necessarily that taffeta does, but it does have a little bit of body. I can't get these pins out, so I can't actually show you while I'm holding the camera, just like kind of how much body it is. I would definitely prefer to have taffeta. So I could call one other Joanne's tomorrow and see. The 2 that I called today, naturally, each said that they had 10 yards and no one could find anything. I'm glad I called instead of went there. But yeah, I would really rather not use this. What I think I'm actually going to do though, because I had not yet laundered the cool fabrics from the fabric district, and like they were sitting out on the street, I feel like they could probably do with some just gentle washing. So those are in the wash right now. They're gonna have to hang dry because they're delicate. I also put in there the stretchy fabric that I got from Joann's that's going to be like the other part of the bodice that you don't see, plus that kind of strip that runs down the under part of the sleeve. So again, all of that is being washed. The stretch one I can just throw in the dryer. So I think I might attempt to do the bodice once that's out of the dryer. And by bodice, I mean like the under portion of the bodice. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a t-shirt that fits really well, that has a similar neckline, and I'm going to like lay it flat and cut the stretchy fabric out of that, and then figure out with the fancy fabric the sleeves and stuff. But yeah, I'm hoping that's gonna work. I did buy extra of the stretch fabric and I can go get more. Joann's had more. It was not the cheapest stuff in the world, but they did have more. So yeah, that is my plan. Now that we've got the skirt patterned, since we can't cut out the skirt pieces yet really, let's go ahead and move on to the underbodice. I just washed the silver metallic-y fabric, hi Macy, and also the black fabric, and I'm trying to hang it dry. I did wash it in the washing machine, but obviously I don't want to put this in the dryer, but I just thought that you guys would appreciate the absolute gloriousness of this fabric just like hanging here. It's so freaking pretty. And I am very, very excited to cut into it as soon as it's dry. So hopefully it will dry very soon. But yeah, this is all rigged up on hangers and hooks on closet doors. And I've got the other one on the shower bar behind me. Oh my God, it's so pretty. Ah, look at that. It's like liquid rainbows. I just love it. I hope it looks even remotely as pretty still underneath the mesh. I think that it will, but that is just, wow. Oh my gosh. Beautiful. I have all of my holographic pieces for the skirt cut out at this point, and what I'm doing is I'm attaching them to the mesh layer that goes over them. And how I'm doing that is basically I did cut off the excess here because this was kind of a scrappy piece of the black mesh, but I am just laying the holographic piece face up and then laying the mesh over it. I'm trying to align the top so that it's like straight across, and ideally the bottom is close to as well, although all the bottoms do curve a little bit. And then I'm going around and I'm just pinning like every 3 inches or so through kind of the heftier part of the mesh, and then just cutting the excess and then basting along the whole edge. So that's what I'm doing for each of these pieces. I think it looks really cool. It is definitely giving all those crazy holographic vibes, almost maybe a little more rainbow than frankly what I was going for. Like I feel like that is what's popping underneath the black as opposed to kind of the silver. Hopefully once everything is all together and hanging, it will look a little bit different. You can actually see just these ones that I've already basted just kind of draped on the form, and they do give off more of that silver tinged rainbow, so I think that's fine. I am getting some sort of like bubbling sort of thing going on around the hem. I did kind of anticipate that because these are 2 stretch fabrics that are obviously not the same level of stretch, and they are kind of hanging at this point, and they will kind of hang. I did baste them anyway just to keep them in place, and I'll kind of work that out when I actually get to the hem and when I get to attaching this to the taffeta layer, which I did get taffeta today from Joann's. And then also once I'm putting the actual like stud trim onto, I will wind up basting little stripes underneath where the stud trim goes. And yeah, so we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But I have 3 of them already basted. There's 4 more to go. So 2 of the sort of narrow side fronts, and then the 2 back pieces also have to be laid out. And hopefully it winds up being that I have plenty of mesh left over for the bodice. I am a little bit concerned. I did wind up having about 1 yard or so of the holographic left, and that is going to go into the bodicey sleevey area. So yeah, I think everything should work out okay, but I kind of wish that I had bought a little bit more fabric just so I don't have to be worried about it, especially because Maisie pulled a hole in this one while it was drying. Luckily it was right on the edge, so I can kind of cut around that, but she is being watched very carefully in this sewing room because she keeps getting into trouble. Isn't that right, Maisie? By the way, I did do a little iron test on this just to see if I could get near it with an iron, and overall, mostly you can. So again, I have already washed this in the washing machine and then it was just hung dried, but over here, I have actually ironed this piece. Now, this upper section right here, I ironed on the back side, and you can see that there is kind of like a little bit of dullness that has been kind of added to each little paillette, if you will. And then down here, I ironed directly onto the paillette surface. And this, I don't know if it's showing up on camera, but it actually looks slightly scratched, like where the iron touched it. I think that was kind of the beginning stages of it melting. I used the iron on a synthetic setting, so it was pretty low temperature, but it did get affected just slightly, both by ironing on the back, very slightly, and then particularly more by ironing on the front. However, it really still does not diminish just like how silvery and how holographic-y it is. I feel like, yes, maybe there's a little bit more brightness to this or a little bit more shine, but overall it's not terrible. So the good news is that I can get near this with an iron. Yay. The top layer of the skirt is all assembled now. So now it is time to cut out the taffeta that is going to basically back all of these pieces. I did not do it as flat lining because I don't want the seams exposed on the inside, because the seams would wind up looking all sparkly like this. So I want it to be solid black. So it's basically going to be bag lined, but then on each of the seams and everywhere that the stud trim is going to go, it is going to be stitched through like almost like it's quilted, I guess, in a way. So hopefully that will help with like the stretchiness of this and help so that it doesn't like bag out. And it will also be incorporated together, obviously, into the waistband and into the gathering that goes into the waistband. The back is going to close up with a zipper. By the way, I haven't decided yet whether it's going to be an invisible zipper or not invisible. I feel like an invisible zipper is asking for trouble with this fabric. Like, it's just, invisible zippers tend to catch on everything anyway. So I don't know. And I don't really feel like like it would show that much back here, even with a non-invisible zipper. So we'll see. Haven't bought that yet because, you know, I forgot it at Joann's. So yeah, that is what it looks like right now. Let's go ahead and cut all of this taffeta fabric that's been sitting on the floor. It is amazing how nice and quick and easy it is to cut out nice flat taffeta that like doesn't move anywhere when you're cutting it, and it's just nice and stiff. And yeah, anyway, it's so much easier than cutting out the other skirt fabrics. What I'm going to do now that everything is cut out and the pattern pieces are all nice and, well, they were flat on top, is I am going to, on the, I guess it would be the side that is touching my legs so that I can see it, of the taffeta, I am going to mark these lines here, because that way I can then use those lines like once all of everything is just assembled, and even once it's assembled to the outer skirt pieces, I can use those lines that I've already marked and sew my sort of like quilted strips where the studs are eventually going to go. I hope the studs get here before my Halloween party. I have no idea. I ordered them. They're not here yet. They supposedly shipped, but the tracking doesn't show any movement. So yeah, we have from today, 1 week and 1 day until the Halloween party. Wish me luck. I know this doesn't look like much, but the inner shell is now fully assembled, so we can go ahead and attach it to the outer. So this is just with the waist pinned together, matching all of the seam lines, but I feel like already you can see a major improvement in the body of the skirt. I'm hoping that as I go through and actually do kind of the quilting lines, for lack of a better term, and everything, that body will get even better. And obviously once I add the stud trim, I really think it's going to get a lot stiffer, which is good because right now it's still looking very drapey. The skirt is now fully quilted, if you will. I don't know why it looks so kind of, you know, wiggly, bunched up, etc. from in here, because it was very smooth when I was doing it. I think it's something to do with just the fact that this fabric is stretchy. So, you know, as it stretches out and then kind of as it goes back, it creates some of those wiggles on the inside. But I don't care what the inside looks like. The outside looks really nice. And I think that even in those kind of mid points that aren't on seams, you really can't see the stitch line, and it's going to get covered over with studs anyway. So yeah, that all looks really good. Now it is time to set the zipper. I decided to do a sports size zipper because I don't want an invisible zipper to get stuck in this all the time, and I feel like this one's not going to get stuck in it, hopefully. So what I'm doing is I'm actually sandwiching the zipper between these two layers, and I'm just going to top stitch really close to the edge, hopefully catching both of these layers in that, and then do the same thing on the other side. And at that point, I should be ready, I think, to go ahead and put the waistband on. I'm slightly hesitant because part of me wants to maybe put the stud edges into the waistband so that I don't have like to fold over edges on the stud trim. The other thing that I need to do is the sparkly fabric did actually stretch out past where the taffeta was, or past where I originally cut it. So you can see that disparity here down at the bottom. So I need to trim that up, and then I will just bind the bottom with bias tape, but I'm not going to do that until after I have the waistband on so that I can make sure I really like the length, because I still do have kind of some doubts about whether it might be too long. But yeah, it looks really pretty. I'm very excited to get the zipper in, and honestly I'll probably do the waistband because the stud trim is meant to get here on Tuesday, but like I kind of want to have that as, you know, the last sort of thing that I'll do before the party so that I can move on to the other pieces that I still need to make. So this zipper insertion is proving to be incredibly frustrating. I have now tried to sew this 3 times, I think, and it is skipping every single stitch. And I changed my needle every single stitch. I moved my needle position over every single stitch. It literally did the tie off, for some reason that worked, and then skipped all of these. So I don't know that you can see the scarring in the taffeta, but that is the area that I stitched, and none of it was stitched, which means that I'm probably gonna have to do this by hand, which is annoying. But at least it's like a short area. But I just don't know why the machine stitching was working relatively fine when I was doing the quilting. Granted, it was skipping some stitches, but not most stitches. Like most stitches were working fine, and then it would skip one every now and then. And now it's just deciding to skip all of them. So fun. I'm gonna go ahead and insert this zipper by hand, probably just using like a running back stitch, and Then we will continue on. I wonder if it will let me do the gathering stitch up at the top. I don't know, I might have to hand gather that too. I don't have time to do this by hand. I don't know why this is causing me all of this grief, but it is. Lovely day. Anyway, I'm gonna go hand sew a zipper in. Well, it is what feels like forever later, but I have a really nicely set zipper that looks very pretty, and it's all done by hand with running back stitches. So now I need to see if my machine will be once again okay with doing the gathering stitches around the waist here so that this can then be set into a waistband, which I probably will go ahead and do now and not wait for the stud trim to like tuck underneath it, because I would much rather have this basically wearable than wait for, you know, the last minute after I finish adding all of the studs, which may not even happen by next Saturday, who knows. So yeah, I'm gonna gather this up if I can. Well, I mean, I will, whether that's by machine or by hand, and then set this on a waistband. The waistband is just gonna be taffeta. No one sees the waistband at all. It just needs to be your basic fitted waistband, probably about 1.5 inches wide. And yeah, I'm gonna go make that right now. Ta-da! I have a skirt! The length I do feel like is really close, which makes me a little bit worried because I do still have to turn up and cut off the excess there, and then I'm just gonna bind it. I could literally just fold it over and bind it like that. So I might pin it and see what that looks like, because I don't want to lose too much length. Kiralee said I could go a little shorter because I'm talking to her while making all of this. But yeah, I think it is pretty cute, pretty good. Right now I'm wearing my 1860s corset with it. If I finish the like actual bodice, I will wear this underneath. If I don't finish the actual bodice, then I will wear this old Corset Story corset that I like had from before I ever made myself corsets, just because this is white. It's my only white corset, so this will be my kind of stand-in, and I'll just wear this on the outside. Luckily they both give me just about the same waist measurement, so that should be fine. But I really like the skirt, and frankly it is technically wearable as is, though obviously it is also pinned in the back here for like the overlap. I need to put some hooks and bars there. But yeah, I am going to be excited when the stud trim gets here, but it's time to move on to the top. So I know this is black on black, so I don't know how well you're going to be able to see this, but what I've got here is actually a shirt from Torrid that is kind of a heavier weight stretchy material and fits really, really nicely. In the front, it has a pretty deep sweetheart neckline, and then in the back, you can see that the lace kind of comes down in a yoke, and that also becomes the sleeves. So this is a decent base to kind of start with for how to pattern the shirt portion of this, which I can't remember if I've already popped this up on screen. But yeah, this is kind of my basis because you can see what she is wearing underneath the bodice, and it's basically black shirt, and then the top parts and the sleeves have all of the meshy holographic bits back there. So I will get to that in a bit, but we're going to start with the bodice shape here, the shirt shape here, which you can tell this one has like a little curve. I'm chopping 3 inches off of the hem down here of, you know, what I'm cutting, not the actual shirt that I already have, because I don't need it to be that long. I just need it to go a couple inches past the waist to tuck into the skirt. I am going to drop this yoke down lower because her yoke is a couple of inches below the armpit that it goes across. Mine is going to be top stitched. So honestly, I probably should go like all the way to the top, but I think I'm going to have a separate seam there and then do like a separate piece that has the 3 layers together, and this part down here just be the 1 layer. So yeah, we're going to try this. I do have more of this. Joann's has more of this if I need to buy more of this, but this is the actual fabric. I'm not really doing a mock-up. I'm obviously going to figure out what it's going to be in this fabric though before I move on to the specialty fabrics. So I decided to actually go ahead and trace out the top portion as well, and that way I can hopefully literally just like applique the parts that need to be the other fabrics on top. So yeah, I traced around everywhere, leaving myself about like a 3/8 inch seam allowance past all of my edges, and hopefully that will work. I'm gonna go ahead and cut this out and try it on. I do have to cut the front, the sweetheart neckline lower, but I'm just gonna cut it out here first. I kind of wish that I had just laid down like half of the shirt so that I could make sure that these sides were even, but yeah, I didn't do that, so I'm gonna have to do that like after I cut it and make sure they're even then. I want to take the corset off, so I decided to go ahead and pin up the hem for the skirt. I think we're in a good place here. All I did is just literally fold the outer part that was too long. I just folded it over. So the like holographic and mesh fabrics, they don't fray. So I can literally fold them over once and then like whip stitch that. And I think that is exactly what I'm going to do because that looks like a good length over there. I do wonder, like as it gets to the side back, if it's maybe a little bit too long, but I think we're gonna stick with it. It is a high-low skirt. I mean, it's supposed to be just below the knee in the back, just above the knee in the front. So yeah, I think we're at a good level with the skirt. If anything, I mean, it feels a little high in the front, but I am pretty sure that it's where it needs to be. Like when you bend my knee, which these tights, you can't really see my knee very well, but that is where it hits on me. So yeah, I think that that's gonna work, which means I can do hand sewing at rehearsal like tomorrow or the next day and do that. So that's great. And I can put the hook and bar on the waistband as well. And then the skirt will be done except for the studs. So fantastic. And now I can take the corset off and move back to the top. All right, so here is the like base of the top part. The neckline is definitely too high, which is weird because I swear on my blouse that I used for like the base of this, the neckline is way lower than this. So I'm not really sure how it came out so high on this version. I have done a little bit of ruching right here at the center because if we look closely at this picture, you can see that there is definitely ruching on hers. That said, obviously like the ruching is bringing this sweetheart down lower, but it is not wide enough, I think, of a neckline. And then it is also certainly not low enough. It needs to be cut a little lower like this. I don't know if I want this much ruching either. I kind of think I want to ease some of this out and then just cut the neckline lower. So yeah, a little bit of tweaking to do, but overall the body of it fits really great. I think that if this were not such like kind of a dense stretchy fabric, that I would have actually made this a little bit too small. One thing is that I told you and I cut it with 3/8 inch seam allowances. And then I sewed the basting for this, because this is just basted together right now. I sewed it with 1/2 inch seam allowances. So I lost a quarter inch? No, I lost, I think, a 1/2 inch, if that math works out correctly, all the way around, which isn't a lot, but you know, it's something. But this is very stretchy and it is the kind that kind of like holds you in as well, which is great. That's exactly what I was going for. I know that there's a little bubble right here. I don't think it matters. So like, I'm not gonna fix the angle of this. This is knitwear. This is fine. And then I need to figure out how to obviously do the sleeves, which again, like, so the sleeves, the actual sleeves, they have this panel going through the underarm, which on basically everyone, it turns out that it is actually mesh. However, I did not know that until a picture that I saw yesterday, I think, because on most people, it does not look like power mesh. It just looks black. So I went out to Joann's today to try and find some power mesh, and naturally, despite them saying that they had it in stock, like 7 yards of it in stock, they couldn't find it at all. And I don't have time to run around to all of the different Joann's to try to find power mesh. So we're just gonna do that black strip out of this fabric. So what I'm thinking with the sleeve, kind of like with this body, is that I'm just gonna like probably make the sleeve out of the black fabric and then like top stitch or just kind of like applique the holographic, etc., netting, etc., on top of that where it needs to go. It's either that or I'd make a completely separate sleeve piece that is just the center. I don't know, that seems kind of weird. And also by doing that, I would wind up with some of the holographic fabric on the inside of the sleeve where it could probably bother my arm, is what I'm thinking. Whereas if I'm doing it top stitched, that edge just gets folded under and it is encased by the base sleeve. So that's what I'm kind of thinking, do the base sleeve. Obviously I do need a seam somewhere though. So I don't know. I mean, maybe I should just do it as the strip, but in any case, I have to figure this out first. So I have to mark, besides, you know, lowering the neckline and increasing the width and everything, I have to mark where I need the holographic stuff to go down to, which I think is about here. It needs to be lower than the top of the corset that I'm going to be making as part of this project. And so I think by putting it down to kind of here, like right about at the rib cage level in the back, I think that that's going to be right. And then in the front, it doesn't go quite so low because the bodice comes up higher. So it comes down kind of, well, on her, I feel like it only goes to here, but again, I have to cut the neckline down lower. So we'll see. I'm going to study some more pictures a little bit more before figuring out exactly where I want to kind of like chalk outline where the holographic needs to go. But yeah, I guess in hindsight, I'm also going to have the holographic inside the sleeve seam up here. So it's possible if that all bothers me that I'm just going to have to like encase or cover over all of the seam allowances inside where that might rub, because yeah, I don't know if that's going to be very comfortable. I feel like it's going to be irritating because it's basically, it's almost like little sticker panels on the fabric. Like if you look super closely at this, and I'm sorry if this is picking up weirdly on camera, but each of these little rectangles, it's like a thing that is stuck onto the fabric that cannot be picked off, but it's rough. And I feel like that in an armpit or underneath an arm, that's gonna be kind of unpleasant. So we might have to cross that bridge when we come to it and like maybe cover it in minky or something nice and soft like that, which I've done before for like tulle or sequins on the inside of seams, because I feel like this is gonna feel pretty much the same. So I'm gonna figure out what's going on up here with like the lines and everything and let you know an update later. Here is take 2 on the neckline. I'm a little bit worried that I cut slightly too much away because I wasn't thinking about seam allowance on this, but I can just make a very, very small little fold over at the edge, and I think that it will be fine. So now that I have the neckline much more opened up, I can go ahead and mark where the holographic needs to be, and then I guess I can just cut the same pieces out in the holographic and top stitch it on top. So I'm partway through cutting out the holographic fabric here, and I thought I would tell you kind of the technique that I'm doing. So I had drawn in my line here to make sure, you know, where I needed it to be. And really I had drawn in half a line. And then because this is loose chalk, I then folded over the black and got the line on the other half. Highly recommend doing that if you're working with chalk. You can literally fold something in half and have that transfer. And then you just darken it up afterwards, but at least you have the faint line. Right now what I'm doing, so I laid the black on top of the holographic and I cut around, you know, where I needed for the holographic. And I started myself so that it was starting about the here on this side. This side had a little bit of extra length. So now what I'm going and I'm doing is I'm just folding up that length and I'm drawing a line with my friction pen. You can kind of see the pink line there. I'm drawing that line exactly where this is. Then I'm going to cut about half an inch past that down here, and that way I can fold in that bottom edge. But I'm not going to fold that in yet because next I'm going to put the mesh down on top of all of this, and because the mesh is mesh and I can see through it, I can put that as the top layer, and I'm going to cut that around, cut it to the same length as down here, and then I will fold those under and top stitch, pin and top stitch in place, and I will go around the outsides here. None of these need to be serged. They are all, you know, lovely knit fabrics that don't have the like edges that's going to fray, and so I can just baste around all of the edges, all of the layers there at the edge, and then I will have the back piece ready, and I'll do the same thing for the front. The front is a little bit different because the front pieces that are going to be holographic are just these funny little side pieces here. And then after that, I will do the sleeves. And unfortunately, that is where I'm going to have to leave it for today. I did actually get a little bit of the hem hand sewn today in between theater stuff that I had going on in the afternoon and the evening. So at least part of the skirt is now hemmed, but the bodice, like top, under bodice, whatever we're calling this thing, that's still in the state that you saw yesterday with the silvery holographic all pinned in place on the back, but nothing yet on the front. So that's where we're going to start off with for next week's video. We are going to do that. We're going to do the sleeves of the under blouse part, and then that will really finish that one off. Other than the rest of the hand hem, the skirt just needs the studs and the hooks and eyes at the waist, and that will be done. I don't know how many studs will actually get on in time because most likely I am going to have to hand sew the stud trim on, even though it is like a hot fix trim. I don't think I can iron it well enough on this fabric that doesn't really want a hot iron. So we'll cross that bridge when it arrives, which is hopefully going to be on Tuesday. But yeah, once I finish the under stuff, it's time to move on to the bodice. So I'm very excited and very nervous about that. And that will be everything for next week. And kind of like a mini reveal as well at the end of the video for whatever state I get it wearable to, because I don't expect to fully finish this like I'm gonna wear it to Emerald City Comic Con type finished, but we're gonna see how far we get for wearability to the Halloween party, and I'm very, very excited. So hopefully you've enjoyed this video so far. I know this was a long one. If you like this video, please go ahead and click the thumbs up icon, and if you'd like to see more videos like this from me, please go ahead and click subscribe and the little bell icon to be notified every time I post a new video. I do post videos here on YouTube at least once a week, usually with sewing vlogs like this out on Tuesdays, and sometimes additional costuming or sewing related content out on Saturdays, but I post every day over on my Instagram, so please go follow me on Instagram. That's at LaterBeccaFashions. And if you'd like to help support all of the work that I do on this channel, I do have a link to my Patreon and my Ko-fi down in the description below, or you can send me a super thanks or join my YouTube channel memberships right here on YouTube below the video. I'd also like to give a special shout out to my Edwardian level patrons, Jean and Kim. Thank you all so much for joining me today. I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I will see you very soon in my next video. Happy sewing and happy Halloween!